Alrighty, what's up everyone? Doing a Q&A today. Before we get into it, I want to let you guys know that I appreciate all of you who have been subscribed since the very beginning and who continue to keep watching my videos. To celebrate, I was going to wait until we got to 1,000 subscribers, but we might as well do it now. Now's as good of a time as any. I'm doing a free two-person float giveaway, and all you have to do to enter is drop a like on this video, comment something down below, and you'll be entered to win. I'm thinking we'll do the giveaway probably in about 4 weeks, let's say a month. Gives everyone time to enter. We'll get out there and we'll have a great time. Anyways, for the last couple months, you guys have been sending me in questions involving the San Juan, fly fishing in general, or even me. I narrowed them down to about 50 questions. Some of them were repeats, but yeah, I have them all written on this piece of paper. And I'm just now realizing I forgot to write your guys' names next to these, so I can't give you credit, but I promise I'll get to all of them. So we got about 50 of these. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into them. First question is, how much do you charge for a full day float trip? You can find all my rates on my website at fishingjackgs.com. Do keep in mind that there's a 2-person limit for float trips. You can only fit 2 people in the boat and 3 people for the wade sections. But if your group has more than 3 people for a wade trip or more than 2 people for a float trip, just get in contact with me and I can work with other guides and we can have you guys all fish together as one group. So yeah, just let me know. Here's a good one. This one says, what is causing fish to disappear from the braids? Over the last few years, I've noticed a steady decline in the number of fish holding between Texas hole and sand hole. What do you believe is causing this? A great question, and I think that kind of narrows down to 3 different things. I think number 1, the San Juan historically used to flow a little bit higher than it does right now. Right now, 500 is an average flow. Back in the day, it wasn't unusual for the San Juan to go above 500 CFS. Even now, we'll still go around 1,000 CFS here and there, but it's a lot more sparse than it used to be. The way that translates to the fish in the braids is they're gonna push out of the places where they don't feel the most comfortable, right? Where there's less water, less oxygenated water, less food. They're gonna move downstream. That's a big reason and a big culprit. I think number 2, a lot of the fish aren't being put necessarily where they need to be or where they should be. There's been times where we go to fish kiddie hole and it is a real task to get into some bigger fish. The analogy that my friend told me was, if you put an ice cream in front of a 9-year-old and a 99-year-old, the 9-year-old's going to get to it before the 99-year-old can. So I definitely think a lot of those fish aren't being physically put into those pockets in the braids, which doesn't give them an opportunity to grow in there. But like I was saying, that doesn't really make a difference if the flow is going to be really low. They're going to push out of there anyways. And I think number 3, San Juan in general just isn't a naturally self-sustaining river, right? We have like a 3% reproduction rate. And basically what that means is if you take a pocket in the braids with 5 or 6 fish and 2 of them get mishandled, 1 of them gets foul hooked and dies, and the other 2 push out because the flow is too low, well then you're not left with very many fish, or if anything. But I think it's important to kind of think about the fact that the San Juan as a tailwater, it's not even 100 years old yet. So stuff's gonna change. I mean, last summer we had a huge blowout in the lower river. We got a lot of rain all at once and the lower river totally blew out. And those fish pushed out of there and they're slowly starting to move back in. But I don't think there's any reason to panic. I just think we have to, I hate to say it, but go with the flow and just accept that, stuff's gonna change. It's not always gonna be the same river. Oh, I hope that answers your question. This next one says, what is something you haven't learned but would like to learn? Maybe go down south and, try my hand at some saltwater fishing. I love sight fishing. So something like in the flats, with redfish, I don't care what fish it is, to be honest, but anything that has to do with sight fishing, I would absolutely love. I would have to say learning the ways of saltwater. I know nothing about it, but I would love to. Great question. Okay, what is your beer of choice when you hit the river? Something very light, like a Modelo. I enjoy the occasional hazy IPA. You know, I'm really not much of a drinker to begin with, but occasionally I'll have a beer when I'm out on the river or at the end of the day with a client. Those would be probably my two choices. Okay, here's another interesting one. This one says, I can't help but notice the negative impact that social media has had on the fly fishing community. Do you believe that social media platforms like Instagram are more beneficial to the fly fishing community or more detrimental, and why? I think it's a double-edged sword. Positive aspects and negative aspects. In the positive sense, there's a ton of people in the fly fishing and just the fishing community in general that I would have never met had I not been on Instagram and Facebook or YouTube. One thing I love to do is post flies on my Instagram and Facebook. I love tying. I imagine a situation where if the people that were following me had zero interest in fly fishing, then that wouldn't be a lot of fun, right? We get to share things with people that have similar interests as us, and I think that in a sense is a positive thing. There's sense it can drive people to do unethical things. I think it can, right, lead to unethical fishing habits. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on younger anglers to catch that next big fish so they can post it on Instagram and get a ton of likes and have a bunch of people tell them how good they are. The situation that I kind of run through my head is, imagine if you caught a 30-inch brown tomorrow. Would you be okay with releasing that fish without taking a picture of it? If your immediate gut reaction is no, there's no way, I have to take a picture with it. You know, I'm not saying you're wrong, because I would have those exact same feelings, but it's always important to keep yourself in check and ask yourself, you know, why am I fly fishing? Am I doing it because I love it, or am I doing it because I want approval from strangers, right? And that applies to a bunch of different facets of life. But really interesting question. I hope that kind of answered it for you. So here's another interesting one. I was recently falsely accused of foul hooking a fish. I was fishing about 7 feet deep with 1 to 2 feet of clarity. The indicator went down and I set the hook. Nonetheless, the fish came in backwards with the hook in its dorsal fin. My question, how does this happen? Well, first of all, let me start off by saying almost everybody has foul hooked a fish before, right? And I think there's a distinction between foul hooking a fish and snagging a fish. Foul hooking a fish, there's no intention, right, to hook the fish somewhere else besides the mouth. Snagging a fish implies that there's intention. When you're fishing 7 feet deep and your indicator goes down, you're supposed to set the hook. So you didn't do anything wrong. But typically what happens is, I think two things happen. Either you're fishing to a pod of fish and the line bumps them, and if your indicator goes down, then you set the hook, and then the hook ends up somewhere where it's not supposed to be. I think that's the first cause. And I think the second cause can be, there's situations where a fish will eat your fly, and if you delay the hook set, or if you're too early with the hook set, that hook can end up somewhere besides their mouth. I think to prevent as much foul hooking of fish as possible, be aware of where you're casting. Don't cast, try to aim for one fish. Don't cast into the big pot of fish, because you don't want your line to get caught up on them and then end up setting the hook as soon as the indicator goes down. You want to be able to see that fish eat your flies, and I think that'll tremendously help. But in the winter time, if you're blind fishing and your indicator goes down and you set the hook and the hook's somewhere where it's not supposed to be, nobody should accuse you of foul hooking fish. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but I hope that kind of clears things up. Okay, this next one asks, what is your go-to rig on the San Juan? So my go-to rig is completely contingent upon where I'm fishing. As far as bugs that I'm using, that's also going to depend on where I'm fishing. This water that I'm sitting next to right now is very slow, deoxygenated. I'm going to look for small bugs in this type of water. Now, if I'm fishing faster water, like in the main channel, I may put something like a big annelid on top and then something smaller on bottom. So my go-to rig is completely dependent on where I'm fishing. And that's true for weight, that's true for depth, that's true for the type of indicator that I'm using. I always use the same leader. It's about a 10-foot leader, but I hope that puts things into perspective a little bit better for you. But great question. This one asks, is the San Juan a more difficult fishery than most tailwaters? I think the San Juan is unique in the fact that we get so much foot traffic and there's so many fish. And some days, you'll walk into a certain spot, right? And there's like 20 fish in front of you and you're casting and they're just not having anything to do with it. So on the San Juan, a difficult day isn't because where you're fishing isn't holding any fish. It could be, the fish are upset for an assortment of reasons. It could be your weight, it could be your depth, it could be a change in the flow. It could be pretty much anything except for the lack of fish, and that can get really frustrating sometimes. I don't think the San Juan is more difficult to fish than most rivers. I think its difficulty is unique, just like on any other river. I can think of another tailwater that's in close proximity to where we are, and they don't have nearly as many fish as we do, but the fish that they do have in there are big and, they've seen it all. So a difficult day there is more so because of those select fish that are in there. Whereas here we have a bunch of fish, but, everything's got to line up for it to click, basically. Hope that answered your question. Next one, do you sell flies? I do not sell flies, unfortunately. It just becomes such a job. Sometimes I just want to go home and lay my head down, but I remember I have to tie up another dozen RS2s or annelids or something like that. But if you see me on the river, I'd be more than happy to give you a couple flies, and you're more than welcome to look at my fly boxes. I have no surprises in there, so you can come say hi, and I'll more than likely give you a couple flies as long as I tied a few extra. If you had to guide anywhere else, where would you be? I really don't think I would be anywhere else. I love being here, and one thing that I really love about the San Juan is we have mild winters. The one thing that will get me out of the house in the winter is to fish, but I love where I live. Also, I have access to, our northern neighbors, and there's a ton of great water up there. I love going east as well, and the San Juan's just one of those rivers where you can really do it all. You can throw streamers, you can throw dry flies, you can nymph all day, you can Euro nymph. So it's just one of those rivers that you can't really get enough of. I really don't think I would be able to go anywhere else, but thanks for asking. When I'm fishing deep, I usually put my heaviest fly on top and my lightest fly on bottom. I find that I often have to clean my bottom fly, which can be a really big task, especially in the winter. How do you keep your flies from catching bottom, and how do you prevent having to clean them every other cast? I would suggest is just try putting your heavier fly on bottom and your lighter fly on top. Usually we would put the heaviest fly on top because we don't want to restrict the smaller fly on bottom. We want it to flow and, look like something that's naturally occurring in the water. If you're fishing something like a jig hook, that hook's designed to bounce and drag on the bottom, right? The hook is going to ride facing up, and you don't want it to catch anything. And with those super tiny small midge hooks, they're gonna grab onto anything, right? Because they have a finer point than a jig hook. Yeah, try putting the smaller fly on top and then try putting the bigger fly on bottom, and I think that'll work out pretty well for you. Great question. What are the San Juan secrets? So there's no secrets on this river. If it's a secret now, eventually it won't be. If you have a certain fly that you think nobody else has, all you have to do is break it off on one fish, and if somebody else catches that fish and pulls that fly out of that fish's mouth and starts tying it up, in 2 years or maybe even less, everybody will be fishing them, and then you'll see them at the fly shop. If something is a secret on this river, it won't be for very long. And that's just kind of a term that's used to kind of hide certain flies, San Juan secrets, but not everything stays a secret. On this river, it's not even about flies. It has very little to do with what flies you're fishing, and it has everything to do with how you're fishing them. Okay, this next question says, when I'm fishing the San Juan in the summertime, I often find that the etiquette can be very poor. For example, I may be the first to the river and get to my favorite spot, and within 30 minutes, somebody comes and fishes within 20 feet of me, and sometimes casting over my line. My question, what's the best way to ask someone for more room without sounding too egregious? So I'll tell you right now, the absolute best way to get someone away from you, not just on this river, but any river or lake or wherever you're fishing, the best way to get someone away from you is to start smoking fish in front of them. And by smoking fish, I don't mean knocking them out and filleting them on the bank and then cooking them up. I mean, start catching one fish after another, boom, boom, boom. The reason that works, it seems counterintuitive because it'll draw people towards you. There's a lot of egos in the fly fishing community, and there's a lot of people that don't want to see you catch fish. And if you start just nailing fish after fish, they'll disappear because they don't want to be around you. And that applies if you're waiting or if you're in the boat. And yeah, they'll disappear. And I guess the other option is just to ask. If somebody's fishing a little too close to you, the best thing to do is to say, hey, you know, it's all about how you say it, not necessarily what you say. Like, hey, you know, I was planning on fishing this. I don't mind if you fish a little bit further up. And if that doesn't work, then, you know, go back to method one. So yeah, at least that's what I would do. What's your least favorite time of year to fish? One thing that will get me out any season of the year is fishing. Nothing will stop me. 4 degrees won't stop me. Wind sometimes will stop me. For me, my least favorite time of year to fish would have to be winter. And I know that's not a popular answer among guides and people that, you know, fish really regularly. But for me, the thing that draws me to the warmer months is just the fact that the bug activity is a lot better. I also love water that's clear. I love being able to sight fish. On the San Juan, when the lake turns over, it gets really murky. We fish a lot of junk, and it's still a lot of fun. Being able to get out here, you know, at like 6 in the morning, being able to push down and get out of here before the crowd really shows up. Everything's green and pretty. My favorite would be summertime, and I'd have to say my least favorite would be winter, but I'm out here right now, so obviously that's not gonna stop me. I have a lot of trouble seeing the eat like you talk about in your videos. Any tips for a newbie for actually seeing them eat your flies? What I usually look for is the fish to start in a neutral position. So that fish is gonna start, right, facing this way, going back and forth. When he sees a bug that he wants, he's gonna turn, open his mouth, and then go back. So your job is to either set the hook when that fish first turns its head and eats, or you can wait a little bit longer and wait for that fish to turn its head, eat, and then turn back. Look for where that fish's neutral position is, and if you're positive that your flies are getting right in front of them, if they veer off that course, then you know that they're looking at your flies. And that's the part that gives a lot of people trouble when they're sight fishing with flies that they can't see, is they don't know when the fish sees the flies. But it's a dead giveaway. When the fish is in this position and your indicator, right, passes over their head, your flies are behind your indicator, if they veer off course like that, that's when you should be setting the hook. So I hope that helps a little bit. Question 16, did you know you'd be a fly fishing guide? Absolutely not. I did not know I would be in this position, just 5 years ago. Yeah, I started out just like anybody else. Was bait fishing, and then I started fly fishing, and then I started going once every 2 weeks, and then it was every week, and then it was leaving Albuquerque at 3 in the morning, driving 3 hours up here, fishing for 8 or 9 hours, and then driving 3 hours back once a week. The obsession just kind of grows, and I've seen it happen to other people too, which is really cool in retrospect. But yeah, I had no idea I would be in this position, and I'm very fortunate. What's the hardest part about guiding? For me, the hard part about guiding is that every client has different expectations, right? Different clients want to do different things, and being able to tailor the day to exactly what you want to do can be the most difficult part. I may get someone that just wants to throw streamers all day. I may get someone who just wants to fish dry flies all day, and someone that just wants to learn how to sight fish. You know, everyone has different things that they want to do, and just being able to meet those expectations and be able to have a good day of fishing, doing it the way that you want to do it, can be challenging. But it's not challenging enough to get me to quit, obviously. That, for me, that's the hardest part. What is the best tippet size to use when fishing dries on lakes? I think that's going to totally depend on, or at least for me, the order of operations that I would follow is, the fly that you have on, start with 4X and then bump the tippet size down, right? If you're getting rejections on 4X, go down to 5X, go down to 6X, and then once you get a fish to commit and to actually eat the fly, then you know it was a tippet size issue. And then you can start swapping out different flies and see, you know, you can kind of deduce if that was the fly that they want or if it's a different fly. And if you're getting break-offs because you're using lighter tippet, then once you have the fly that they want, then you can slowly bump the tippet size up until you're basically comfortable and not getting a lot of break-offs. Great question. Question 19, what does your nymphing leader look like? Buy a spool of like 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon, and I'll tie a perfection loop on one end and attach that to my fly line. Usually my leaders are about 10 to 11 feet long. And what I'll do is I'll either attach a micro barrel swivel to the end or a tippet ring. In the boat, I like a barrel swivel a lot better because usually we're fishing deeper and there's a lot of different hydraulics going on, versus in the wade section, a tippet ring works really good for certain situations. Like I was saying with this water, where even a size 9 split shot's gonna be a little bit too heavy, but that tippet ring is going to be enough weight to get your flies down to depth. That's my leader setup. What music do you listen to before your guide trips or before a day of fishing? What gets you into the right mind frame? That like 25-minute drive from my house to the river it's very important to me. It gives me an opportunity to wake up. I can drink my energy drink. I can come up with a plan for what I'm going to do for the day. And as of late, heavy metal has been getting it done for me. I used to listen to a lot of hip hop. I used to listen to a lot of, you know, pop and country. I listen to almost everything. But as of late, heavy metal has gotten me into the right mindset. I don't know why, but yeah, that's where my mind is at. Alrighty. In the summer months on the Juan, it seems like the fishing tends to slow down around noon and tends to pick back up again in the later afternoon. Any ideas on why that is? I think this is a really great question because, and I think it kind of falls into two categories. I think number one, these fish are just gonna have natural eating habits and they're gonna be more apt to eat, you know, at this time rather than this time. Just have natural eating cycles. But I think another important consideration is when this river gets jam-packed with people, right? June, July, October, September, those months, fish can get a little bit shy, right? They get used to your patterns and my patterns, and they know when you're gonna show up, they know when I'm gonna show up. There's certain times in T-hole, like, you know, 10 o'clock in the middle of the summer, where it can kind of shut off in there. It can get kind of slow. From the fish's perspective, if I eat this particular fly every day at this exact same time, I end up in a net against someone's tape measure, and then I'm gonna get thrown back into the water. To prevent that, maybe I shouldn't eat at 10 o'clock, right? Maybe I shouldn't eat between 10 o'clock and 11:30. I think that's something to really, really kind of think about when you come out here. Anyways, that's kind of my theory on it. Do with that information as you will. I've been fly fishing for about 3 years now, and I'm looking to upgrade to a higher end fly rod. Is there anything that you would recommend? I'm not sure what your exact budget is. This is gonna be a very opinionated answer, and this is just the way that I see things. Don't buy an expensive fly rod under the impression that it's gonna make you a better angler. Buy an expensive fly rod because you want the latest and greatest technology and you want something to be proud of. I think that's the reason to buy an expensive fly rod, is for the research that went into it. That being said, some of the biggest fish that I've ever caught have been on a $50 Echo fly rod with like a $20 reel on it. You really don't have to spend a lot of money to catch a lot of fish or to catch big fish. I would check out some of the higher end Orvis rods. I would also check out Scott rods. I think Scott rods are amazing rods. And yeah, those would be my two recommendations, Orvis and Scott rods. Question 23, how did you come up with Fishing Jack? You know, I started my YouTube channel, and at the time I was doing different types of fishing. I wasn't exclusively fly fishing, and then this just completely took over my life. I didn't want to do anything else. I just love fly fishing so much. I came up with Fishing Jack because I planned on making videos that weren't exclusive to fly fishing. And as far as the actual name Fishing Jack, I just wanted to keep it I just wanted to keep it simple, to be honest. I mean, my name is my street name is Jackson, my legal name is Jackson, so I figured, okay, Jack, What do? I fish, so fishing jack. So that's where it comes from. What is the guide culture like? I can only speak for myself and for my buddies, and I would say the guide culture is taking the job, seriously for what it is. And we come out here, we fish on our days off, we fish in the summertime, we fish in the winter, we fish every off day that we can, whenever we have a free day, and getting stuff figured out. It's just one spot or one particular fish, or whether it's an entire area, we may spend an off day just fishing that and getting that dialed in so that you can put some fish in the net. To me and my close friends, that's the only guide culture that we'll ever know. This next one says, I've been fly fishing the Juan for about 10 years and I have yet to catch my big fish. I'm starting to think that I'm cursed. Any advice for finding the big fish on the San Juan? There's 2 ways to target them. The first is a direct way. And the direct way involves coming out here and disregarding a lot of the other fish that you could be fishing for and catching, and looking for those big fish. I'm talking, going to certain structures that you think are gonna hold big fish, and just looking for them. Even if you spook them, at least you know that they're there, so that the next time you come back, you can fish for them, right? And you won't have to guess where they are. The other method is to catch them indirectly, which is basically just fishing in a way that's conducive to catching big fish, right? I'm talking like throwing big streamers, fishing in places that you think are holding big fish, right? Blind fishing. That's kind of what it narrows down to. If you're really looking to get into a bigger, like 28 or bigger, what I would do is just spending a day looking for those fish. But if you're not going to do that, then fish in a way that's going to produce bigger fish. And I hope that helps you out. Do streamers work on the San Juan in winter months? They do. They work all year round. I'm not a huge streamer fan. I'll throw streamers on occasion. Yeah, definitely give them a try. Like I said, you can get into some big fish on the San Juan fishing streamers. Question 27. I enjoy seeing your fly patterns that you post on Instagram, and I often struggle to be creative behind the vise. Where do you get your inspiration from? First of all, thank you. I really appreciate that. I get a lot of my inspiration from stuff that I see other people post. You could turn an RS2 into a Baetis just by adding gills to it, right? Have a foam wing case, same materials for most of the flies that you tie, and you're just kind of putting them in different places and changing their color or changing their size. A great way to do that is to come out to the river and take samples, right? Take samples of the real bugs that are in here, and then go back to your vise and try to tie something that looks as close as possible to it. Not that you need to tie a bug that looks exactly like what's in the river. I mean, I think an RS2 doesn't really look like anything specific in the river, but it looks buggy enough and impressionistic enough to look like an assortment of things. And that's what's more important. You don't need to tie a fly that looks exactly like what's in the river. It just has to represent a bunch of different stuff. Grab a stimulator out of your box, look at it, and it doesn't look like anything. But the point is that the fish think that it is something, and that's what's more important than what it looks like to you. If swap materials, change colors, bigger sizes, smaller sizes, and yeah, you'll come up with something pretty good. Can you recommend a pair of waders? I can't. I really can't. Every pair of waders that I've ever had have leaked, and I stand firm on the idea that any pair of waders that you will ever buy will eventually leak. So I'd say the one distinguishing factor to consider is how often do you fish and how comfortable do you want to be. For me, it's all about comfort. That's what I want. I want it to feel like I'm wearing pajamas, you know? That's just my opinion. Hope it helps. All right, next question. What is the main difference between booking a float trip and a wade trip? I would assume the float trip is more convenient, whereas the wade trip is more learning oriented. Thank you. Yeah, great question. So the float trip is definitely, you can do anything in the boat that you can do in the wade sections, with the exception of the fact that in the boat you can get technically an endless drift, meaning that you may not have to mend a whole lot since the boat is doing a lot of work for you. Yeah, you hit it right on the head. With wade trips, they're going to be a lot more learning oriented, in the sense that we're going to work on getting your drift, your weight, and your depth more dialed in for specific places that you're fishing, so you can always come back to those same spots and you already know what to do. Whereas in the boat, if you're the one rowing the boat, you're not doing a whole lot of fishing. Yeah, give them both a try. They're both a blast. Question 30. I've fished with plenty of guides over the years, and I've had my fair share of complaints or things that I would have liked the guide to have done better. Therefore, it's only fair that I ask, what do you expect from your clients? Well, for me, the only expectation that I have for my clients, and I know this isn't always possible, but the one thing that can make a huge difference in how the day goes is showing up with a positive mental attitude. So believe it or not, not everyone enjoys fishing. Not everyone wants to be out here, sitting in a drift boat for 8 hours. The way that kind of translates to how the day goes is, someone that shows up with a positive mental attitude is going to be more eager to learn, and that's going to translate to better casting, better drifts, better mends, and usually that ends up putting more fish in the net. But that's my only expectation is, show up with a positive mental attitude, ready to learn something new, and just have a good time. I'm almost 18 years old and I'm wanting to become a fly fishing guide. What steps would you recommend to do so? So there's two ways of going about it. I'm very fortunate to be on this river because in a lot of states, you're kind of limited by permits. So the big thing with guiding is pretty much almost everywhere that you will guide will require you to have some type of permit, and you pretty much always need to have insurance. So if you're interested in guiding, the two ways to go: you could go independent and start your own business, or you could opt to work for somebody else. So those are the two options. But if you want more information, feel free to email me and we can get in touch and I can sort of lead you in the right direction. What is the hardest technique to teach to a newbie? A big part of your drift, right? I talked in my previous video about using split shot correctly and being able to dial in your weight and depth, but being able to get those mends. And one thing that I always teach to my clients is the stack mend. So the stack mend will really toss all of your line to the opposite side of your indicator. It'll get you a drag-free drift. And I think being able to read different types of water is also important. There's certain situations where your flies and your indicator will land in water that's faster than the water that's proximal to you, that's closer to you. And you'll have to do these little tiny adjustments, casting upstream and then casting downstream. And usually that takes the longest for a newbie to kind of understand. Usually, halfway through the day or the first couple hours of the day, a newbie will start to kind of get that idea into their head. But I would say that's probably the hardest part to teach to somebody that's brand new. What do you use to take pictures of your flies? So I use a light box. You can get it on Amazon. It's basically just this white plastic box with LED strips on the top, and you just plug it into a socket and it lights it up real bright. I use my phone for pictures. It has a macro lens or macro capability on it, where you can get up real close to those flies and take pictures, and you can adjust the aperture and the contrast and that type of stuff, edit them a little bit. But yeah, I use my phone and I use a light box. Next question. I've never done much research into this, but why does the San Juan get murky in the winter time? And how does this affect the fishing? So the reason that the water gets murky in the winter time is because the lake turns over. And what that means is basically the top of the lake gets colder than the bottom. So the bottom will rise up and the water on top will go down, and that brings up a bunch of soot in the lake, and then that gets carried into the river and it turns it off color for a few months. So the way that affects the fishing is basically you can start using bigger flies, right? It's not really going to affect the fishing in general. You're still going to catch as many fish. The fishing will be just as good. You're just going to kind of have to blind fish, which for me isn't my personal favorite, but that's really the only difference. 30 something, what were your hobbies before you started fly fishing and guiding? Baseball was a huge part of my life from the time I was 9 years old until I was like 17. It was just every day. It was just baseball every single day. And that's kind of how I feel about fly fishing now. It just kind of took over my whole life, and this is really all I do. So that's kind of my backstory. Question 36, when I'm casting a 2-fly rig, I often find that my flies just puddle together. I can't get them to fully extend. Is there any specific technique that I can use to fix that? What I would do is I would raise your arm a little bit higher. If you're holding it a little bit further down, that rod tip is gonna make more of an arc. When your indicator hits the water before your flies do, that causes your indicator to pull your flies down, and then they don't get that full extension. So the way that you fix that is you hold your arm up just a little bit higher, and you wanna get that flight line going down on that forward cast and then back up on your back cast. And you never want it to hit behind you. Whereas if you're holding it right here, you know, kind of close to your shoulder, it's gonna make that arc, kind of like a rainbow. But if you hold it just a bit, you know, almost above your head, even when you're fighting a fish, I like to hold it above my head. It's gonna get that fly line to fully extend on that forward cast, and then they're gonna lay out a little bit more flat. Sort of give it like a hard stop on that forward cast, and that'll get it to pause. It'll pull your indicator back just a bit, and your flies will extend past the indicator. I sometimes get my second fly stuck in a fish when I'm in the middle of a fight. For example, I'll set the hook on a fish, I see the fly in its mouth, it goes for a long run, and on the way back, the second hook ends up in its dorsal fin or its pectoral fin. My question, how do I keep this from happening? The way that I fight fish and the way I prevent that from happening is to keep my arm elevated. Just like we were talking about with the casting, when I'm fighting a fish, my arm is staying a little bit up here. And the reason I do that is because I want to have leverage on them. I want that line to be pointing as much as possible down at the fish. I don't want it to be pointing at them. When that fish goes on a run, they may touch that other fly, and then that's all it takes for the, that hook to get lodged into them, and then all the weight gets transferred to the fly that's closest to the rod tip instead of the one that's in its mouth. So to fix that, all you have to do is just hold your arm a little bit higher, make sure that rod is bent and pointing down at the fish as much as possible. It's a lot easier in the boat because you already have leverage on them, right? You're already above the fish. But when you're wading, especially when you're wading like almost chest deep, that line is going to have the tendency to point at the fish rather than be on top of them. So if the line is pointing straight down on them and your second fly is up here, there's no possible way that fish can get hooked by that other fly. What's it like rowing a drift boat? I've had thoughts about purchasing one, but I'm not sure how long it'll take me to get down, so I'm not sure if it would be a worthwhile purchase. It definitely takes a while to get used to it. Usually the first thing, the easiest thing to get down is the forward rowing, the back rowing, and the spinning. That's the easy part. But on a river like the San Juan, there's not a lot of rapids that you have to worry about. There's no real fast water. There's no class 3 rapids, nothing crazy like that. But the hard part about rowing on the San Juan is being able to hold a line. And on this river, one boat width can mean the difference between catching fish or, rowing right over the top of the fish that you're trying to fish for. So crab rowing is really essential, and really all that is basically you have one oar in facing downstream of the boat, and then you have the other oar facing out, and you're pushing in with one oar and you're back rowing with the other, and that's how you get the boat to turn without having to turn the whole boat, back row, and then turn again, and then forward row. So that's the hardest part about rowing a boat, and really all it takes is just practice. I think maybe 3 weeks on the water, rowing every day for about 6 hours, and you'd have it down pretty good. The fast water is nothing to worry about, just point towards danger, back row. But crab rowing on this river it's pretty essential. Get that down and you'll be good. What type of sunglasses do you wear? I have a pair of gray sunglasses with polarized lenses, but I've heard amber lenses are a lot better for sight fishing like on the San Juan. What would you recommend? Thanks. Amber or copper colored lenses are going to be the best for visibility and seeing into the water. But realistically, as long as you have a pair of sunglasses that are polarized, it doesn't really matter what brand. My first year, I fished with like a pair of $15 Amazon sunglasses, and they did the job. Sometimes I'd look at a fish and I'd look away and the polarization would disappear. But what do you expect from a $15 pair? But these are Costa Reef Fins. They have a gray mirror to them, and they have amber lenses, so I can see straight through the water. They're really great. I love glass lenses. I think they're really high quality. They give a little bit more clarity than the polycarbonate. As long as you have a pair that are polarized, that's going to be better than any other pair. But if you're looking for a specific brand, check out Costa's. I love the Reefdens. I used to have a pair of the green mirror, but they lay at the bottom of Texas Hole for the rest of eternity, unfortunately. And check out Maui Jim, check out Smith. There's a bunch of great brands out there to try out. And yeah, go for the amber lenses. Or if you like the way the blue ones look, as long as they're polarized, you'll be much better off. Question 40, we have about 10 more questions. I've seen you fish with the Shadow X before. Which model do you prefer for the San Juan? San Juan is big water. I was fishing with the Shadow X in the 11-foot model, 3-weight, and that allowed me all the reach that I needed. Nothing but good things to say about Echo and the Shadow X. That rod has amazing tippet protection. Castability is great. Comes with the counterbalance weights, downward locking reel seat, and yeah, it's a great piece of equipment to have. I fished it with an indicator as well, and it does an awesome job. So check out the 11-foot if you still want one. It'll work just fine on most other rivers too with big water. How are you fishing shallow water on the San Juan? That's a great question. I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I like to use something to connect my leader to my tippet, either a barrel swivel, micro barrel swivel, or a tippet ring, and that kind of acts as a split shot on its own. So that'll get your flies down to depth when you're fishing stuff like this. A tippet ring, and of course it depends on the size of the tippet ring as well as the size of the micro barrel swivel. Usually that's enough weight to get me down to depth to wherever I am. From there, it's just a timing thing, you know, casting at the appropriate distance for where that fish is, depending on how much current there is. That's gonna basically determine how much weight you need. And I think in a lot of situations, the tippet ring will get you down to depth, and that'll get the job done. Question 42, hi. I usually set my drag appropriately before I even cast, but sometimes I find that when the fish starts running after I set the hook, the reel doesn't immediately start to spin, and I end up breaking the fish off. Any helpful tips for fixing that? A lot of the reels that we use with the drag system, they're gonna have a little bit of like startup torque. It's kind of like in a car, how it uses different gears to get to the next gear. It's the same kind of principle with a reel, especially when you're fishing really small bugs like 26s. If you put just a little bit too much pressure on like a Gamakatsu, like size 28, they're gonna bend out like nothing. So usually what I'll do is if I'm fighting a big fish, right? Like say you hook like a 20-incher on, I don't know, a size 26. What I do is after the hook set, if I anticipate that fish is gonna run and it's already on the reel, I'll pull a little bit of line out, and that's just enough I guess motion to get the reel to start to spool, and you kind of prevent that little bit of delay, you know, in the reel starting to spin, because you never want to put too much pressure on the size hooks that we're fishing at this river. So yeah, next time you hook a fish, try giving it just a little bit of line, get it onto the reel, and then if you feel like that fish is almost at the net and then it turns its head, try pulling a little bit of line out to get that reel going, and then you should be good from there. 43, what was your first year of guiding like? Definitely intimidating, because you constantly feel that pressure to perform and prove yourself. And yeah, the first year of guiding is just there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of late nights staying up. Oh, I hope the fishing's going to be good tomorrow. I hope, you know, my clients have a good time. There's a lot of anxiety in that first year. What does your fly rig look like? Are you typically running one split shot above both flies, or are you putting split shot between both of your flies? Like 99% of the time, I like to use one split shot. And the reason I like to do that is because I know exactly how a size 9 split shot's gonna sink, and I know exactly how a size 5 split shot's gonna sink. There's situations where if you forget, you know, one of your split shot boxes and you can't keep bumping up weights individually, if you're fishing fast water, you can definitely put another split shot between your flies, and that'll actually bring that bottom fly underneath the tippet ring. So that's one application where you could use a split shot between the flies, but the majority of the time I just like to keep it as simple as possible. Another thing to think about is it's a lot easier to cast with one split shot than it is with two. A lot more tangles are going to happen if you're fishing two split shot. If you think about it, you're already casting the weight of the indicator, the tippet ring, the flies, the split shot that you already have on there, and then the split shot between your flies, and it can get kind of messy. Keep it as clean as possible. Adjust your weight with one split shot. I think that's the best way to go. What's the best time of year to fish the Juan? The Juan is a consistent fishery year round. You can fish it summer, spring, winter, every season, and it's going to produce fish, and it's going to fish really well. The things to look out for, the things that can upset the fishing are changes in the flow, right? If they bump it from 300 CFS to 900 CFS, that could upset the fishing for a little while. Temperature swings can upset the fishing. I wouldn't recommend getting out here when it's blowing like 30 miles an hour. Definitely check the weather, but it's a consistent year-round fishery, and you're pretty much always going to get into fish year-round. Question 46, what are the basics to Euro nymphing? I have a video on this. I did it in Pecos. It's called Pecos River Euro nymphing or something. I did it a little over a year ago. And if you check out that video, it has everything start to finish, how to rig, type of leader, type of flies. And yeah, check out that video, Pecos River Euro nymphing, and that should get you started. Next up, what's the best fly to use on the San Juan? As long as you're in the range of, you know, if you're talking about bugs, if you're in the range of size 20 to 30, any of those will work. During junk season, which is like right now when the river gets really murky, you can use stuff like leeches, mott flies, eggs, that type of deal. But there's really no one best fly to use. It's really all just about weight and depth. That's always what I'm gonna say. I know I get really repetitive with that, but that's honestly the truth. It's about putting the flies where the fish are. Question 49, how deep do you usually fish in Texas hole? It totally depends on where I'm fishing. Like in the dead center of Texas hole, I'm just taking a guess, it's probably like 15 feet deep. I'm fishing, you know, about 10 feet deep with like a size 0 split shot. Or if I really need to, I can, you know, put a longer leader on there and really get those flies to drag on bottom. But the bottom of the river is going to change in terms of depth depending on where you are. If you're at the top of T-hole, it might just be 4 feet deep. So, you know, the general rule of thumb is 1.5 times the depth. But if you see the fish high column, lighten your rig up. If you see nothing going on towards the surface, then you can fish a little bit heavier, get those flies down there. I think it's good to start a little bit heavier and fish bottom, and then work your way up, and then find out where those fish are holding in the water column, and then, you know, that's when you can start swapping flies and that type of deal. All right, last one. On the Juan, meticulously cover good holes or keep moving and cover more water. It's an awesome question. If you're having a tough day on this river, my best piece of advice would be to keep moving. Never stick in one spot for too long unless it's fishing well. Some of my toughest days, you know, fishing by myself or with clients, the most success that we have when the fishing is tough is to keep moving, right? Each pocket we'll pick out 2 or 3 fish. Next pocket we'll get 1 fish, next one we'll get 2. Obviously, if one spot is fishing really well for you and you're like 6 or 7 fish after like 20 casts, then, you know, it might as well stay there, right? Don't leave fish to find fish. If you're having a tough day out here, don't stay locked into one spot. I know we can kind of get into the habit of doing that, but on this river, if the fish just aren't having it with you today, then, you know, move somewhere else and try something different. That would be my piece of advice. All right, well, we went over your guys' questions. I think I'm gonna get some fishing done. Be sure to enter the giveaway. All you have to do is comment down below, drop a like. Yeah, and in the meantime, I guess I'll just see you guys out on the water. Thanks for watching.